People congratulated me when I became crown prince. They celebrated. They called it an honor, a privilege, a moment of pride. And it was all of those things, but it was also something else, something no one talks about. It was the moment I lost myself, not dramatically, quietly, piece by piece, until the person I was before disappeared. Today, I'm going to tell you what I lost when I became crown prince, not the public version, the private one. The truth no one sees, because gaining a crown doesn't mean you lose nothing. Sometimes it means you lose everything that made you human. Before I became crown prince, I was different, not completely free. I was still royal, still watched, still held to expectations. But there was space to make mistakes, space to be uncertain, space to figure out who I was beneath the title. I could ask questions without them becoming policy. I could express doubt without it being seen as weakness. I could change my mind without it undermining confidence. I had friends who didn't need anything from me, who saw me as a person first, not a position, who laughed with me without calculating advantage. I had time that belonged to me, hours where I wasn't scheduled, moments where I could just exist, days where I could disappear without consequence. I had privacy, not complete privacy, but enough. Enough to have conversations that weren't reported, enough to make choices that weren't analyzed, enough to fail without it becoming a story. I had hope. Hope that my life could include something chosen freely, that love could exist outside arrangement, that personal happiness was still possible, that the future wasn't entirely written. That was who I was before, still royal, still responsible, but still human, still discovering, still believing that parts of my life could be mine. And then I became crown prince, and everything changed. The moment I became crown prince, the weight multiplied, not gradually, instantly. Everything I said suddenly mattered more. Every decision carried larger consequences. Every appearance was scrutinized at a different level, because I was no longer just representing myself. I was representing the future, the next generation of leadership, the continuation of everything the family had built. That pressure changed how people treated me. Friends became more formal, conversations became more careful, laughter became more measured, because I wasn't just Hamdan anymore. I was the crown prince, and the crown prince doesn't get casual relationships, he gets strategic ones. People stopped asking how I felt. They started asking what I thought. Politically, they stopped sharing personal problems. They started presenting opportunities. They stopped treating me like a person and started treating me like a position. That shift was immediate and irreversible, because once you become crown prince, you can never go back to being just a person, not in their eyes, and eventually not in your own. The first thing I lost was freedom, not legal freedom, personal freedom, the freedom to move without surveillance, the freedom to speak without calculation, the freedom to fail without it becoming a referendum on my capability. Before I became crown prince, I could travel without every movement being tracked. I could meet people without every interaction being analyzed. I could make mistakes without them being documented as evidence of poor judgment. After, every trip required explanation. Every meeting required justification. Every mistake was remembered, recorded, used to measure my readiness. I also lost the freedom to be uncertain. Before I could say, I don't know. I could admit confusion. I could ask for time to think. After, uncertainty was seen as weakness, confusion as incompetence, delay as indecision. I was expected to know, to be certain, to decide quickly and confidently, even when I didn't have enough information, even when the situation was complex, even when I needed more time, because the crown prince doesn't get to be uncertain. He has to project confidence even when he doesn't feel it. So I learned to hide doubt, to perform certainty, to make decisions even when I wasn't sure. And that performance, that constant performance of confidence I don't always feel, that's exhausting. It's also isolating because you can't be vulnerable with people who expect you to always be strong. You can't admit fear to people who need you to be fearless. You can't ask for help from people who believe you have all the answers. So you stop asking, you stop admitting, you stop being vulnerable, and slowly you lose the ability to connect, because connection requires honesty, and honesty in my position is dangerous. Becoming crown prince changed every relationship in my life. Some people got closer, not because they cared more, but because I became more valuable, more useful, more important to their own interests. Those people I learned to identify quickly, and I learned to keep them at a distance. Even while appearing close, other people pulled away, not because they stopped caring, but because the gap between us became too wide. I was no longer relatable, no longer accessible, no longer the person they used to know. I was the crown prince, and the crown prince exists on a different level, a level that makes casual friendship impossible. But the relationship I lost that hurt most was the one that mattered most, the woman I loved. She existed before I became crown prince, when I was still figuring out who I was, when my future felt uncertain enough to include possibilities, when love still felt like something I could choose. Becoming crown prince ended that, not immediately, but inevitably, because the crown prince's marriage is not personal. It's strategic, it's arranged, it's designed to serve the institution, not the heart, and she didn't fit that design. She was outside the system, unknown, unpredictable, everything the institution couldn't accept, so I had to choose the crown or her, and I chose the crown, not because I didn't love her, but because choosing her would have meant losing everything else, and I wasn't strong enough to do that, so I let her go. And with her, I lost the last part of my life that felt truly mine, the last relationship that existed because I wanted it to, the last connection that wasn't filtered through duty. That loss was the cost of the crown, and it's a cost I carry every day. I also lost privacy, not completely, but substantially. Before I became crown prince, I could have private moments, conversations that stayed private, decisions that remained personal, emotions that didn't become public analysis. After, everything is observed, everything is interpreted, everything is used to measure, judge, evaluate. I can't have a bad day without it being noticed. I can't express frustration without it being documented. I can't make a minor mistake without it being discussed, because the crown prince is always being watched, not just by the public, by the palace, by advisors, by people whose job is to ensure I remain appropriate, predictable, controlled. That level of surveillance is suffocating. It means you can never fully relax, never fully let your guard down, never fully be yourself, because yourself might not be appropriate, might not fit the image, might not serve the role. So you learn to edit yourself constantly, to filter your thoughts before they become words, to suppress your emotions before they become expressions, to perform normalcy even when nothing feels normal, and that performance becomes so constant that eventually you forget what's real and what's performance. You forget who you actually are beneath the role, and that forgetting, that slow disappearance of self, that's what privacy protects, and I don't have it anymore. Becoming crown prince also meant losing the future I might have had. Before, the future felt uncertain, open, full of possibilities. I didn't know exactly where I'd end up, what I'd become, who I'd be with. And that uncertainty, while uncomfortable, was also hopeful, because uncertainty means possibility. After the future was written, I would become ruler, I would marry appropriately, I would produce heirs, I would lead. All of that was decided, not by me, for me. And with that certainty came the loss of every other possibility. I would never live abroad long term. I would never pursue a passion that didn't serve the role. I would never choose a partner based solely on love. I would never experience the freedom of building a life from scratch. All of those possibilities disappeared, not because they were bad, but because they didn't fit the plan. And the plan, once you become crown prince, is absolute. So I lost the future I might have chosen and accepted the future chosen for me, not happily, but inevitably, because refusing the crown was never actually an option. It was just an illusion of choice. And once I understood that, I stopped imagining alternatives. I stopped wondering, what if? I stopped hoping for a different path, and I accepted the one laid out for me. That acceptance was the final loss. The loss of hope for anything different. People ask what's left after losing all of that. Freedom, relationships, privacy, future possibilities. What remains? Duty, purpose, meaning found in service. I'm not going to pretend that's enough. It's not the same as happiness. It's not the same as fulfillment. It's not the same as living a life you chose. But it's something. And when everything else is gone, something is better than nothing. I serve. That's what remains. I serve my family, my nation, my people. The future that extends beyond my lifetime. And that service gives structure, gives direction, gives meaning to the sacrifice. Not joy, but meaning. And meaning, when happiness isn't available, becomes the foundation. It's what keeps you going when everything personal is gone. When duty is all that's left. What did I lose when I became crown prince? I lost freedom. I lost privacy. I lost the relationships that felt real. I lost the woman I loved. I lost the future I might have chosen. I lost the ability to be uncertain, to make mistakes privately, to exist without constant observation. I lost parts of myself I'll never get back. The parts that questioned, that dreamed, that believed personal happiness was still possible. All of that gone, not because the crown is evil, but because the crown requires sacrifice, total sacrifice of self, of choice, of every possibility that doesn't serve the role. People see what I gained, the title, the power, the position. What they don't see is what I lost, and what I lost was everything that made me human. Not completely, but substantially, enough that the person I was before, that person doesn't exist anymore. He was replaced by the crown prince, and the crown prince serves, leads, performs, but he doesn't live, not the way people who have choices live. He exists inside duty, and duty, no matter how meaningful, is not life, it's just what's left. When everything else is taken, that's what I lost when I became crown prince. Not in one moment, but gradually, piece by piece, until the person I was disappeared. And only the role remained. If this helped you understand the cost of crowns, I'm glad. Not because I need sympathy, but because understanding what privilege costs is the only way to see it clearly. Thank you for listening.